Mueller has his day in court.
Trump does a victory lap.
But who came out on top?
Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America.
Well, actually, for those of you who know us on the private channel, on the other channels that we have, we were dealing with a bed bug infestation.
Yes.
And so we were actually up at a time that we're usually not up because we do all of our shooting later at night. And it was rare. It was like 9 a.m. I was like, what? People like live at this time? And so we were watching the Mueller report. So we watched it pretty much from start to finish because we didn't sleep that day.
At all.
In the providence of God, we didn't have any sleep, and we got to watch a pretty historical moment in our democracy.
It was fun. Plus, we were half like, like when you don't get enough sleep, and so you're kind of like,
it's the doctor. Right. So
I was like, is it the report? Is it us?
The entire report or ordeal or whatever was about 7 hours long or 3 hours long, depending. So obviously, we're not going to give you a play-by-play, but we do have some highlights, and then we're going to talk about the aftermath and fallout, and then we'll take it from there. The biggest thing that I noticed with Mueller was that I was pretty surprised about the way his affect, like the way that he presented himself.
Yeah, I was. I mean, I haven't seen him other than just that one thing, but I was like, oh, I feel so bad for him. He just looks like a little old man, and
yeah, he was definitely doing the Kaiser Soze thing. If you guys know Usual Suspects, in my opinion, it just seemed to me that Mueller his whole posture was basically, I don't want to, and this is an angle that nobody has talked about, but I think it's valid, but do what you want with it. But it seemed to me that Mueller was protecting himself. It seemed like, he basically told the DNC or the Democrats basically, like, look, y'all, I'm going to take care of me because Trump, at the end of the day, Donald J. Trump is the most powerful human being on the face of the earth. And if he wants to get you, he can get you. And if you're speaking for 7 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is, and you screw up and you say something, it's not without reason that
you're going to jail.
That something could happen to Mueller if Trump can convict him or get one of his high-powered prosecutors to convict him of corruption or something, or bias or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, but it just seemed to me that he had a defensive posture it was like, he was like, because he wasn't like aggressively saying, go to the report, read the report. Like he didn't have like that energy that he was putting forward. He was saying those things, but it was very like, just go to the report. Well, and the majority of what's interesting is I've actually had to do a deposition. This wasn't a deposition, but it was very, very similar to a deposition where you sit down, there's a panel of 4 lawyers, and they go after you for hours, and everything is recorded and everything's written down. It's a pretty, if you're not prepared, it's a pretty nerve-wracking, and it seemed to me like the preparation that you get when you go before a deposition is, it kind of felt like that same type of energy. Of course, you weren't there. So like he just seemed to be a guy who didn't want to say the wrong thing because he's worried about himself and his future. And it's interesting because what people might not have seen, there are a few times where he said correct, or that's a fact, where he was really like, yup, that's true. And then other times he'd say generally true. And then other times he would say, go to the report. So here's the montage of check this out, babe.
You talk about the president's pattern of conduct. That would include the 10 possible acts of obstruction that you investigated, correct?
I direct you to the report for how that is characterized.
Did McCann do what the president asked?
I refer you to the report. Again, I send you the report for where that is stated. I refer you to the report. I direct you again to the report. I refer to the report on that episode. Refer you to the report if I could. I'd send you back to the report.
Is he laughing in the background?
It's like,
yo, yeah.
So it's but again, I get it because you've got the AG's doing his own investigation, and there are even implications like we're going to be investigating you in the. We'll talk about it later. So he's getting beat up a lot by people on both sides today, which some of it I think is fair, some of it I think is unfair. Like, for example, people are like, a lot of Republicans are like, he didn't even know what was in his own report. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, you write a 486-page report
over 400 pages,
and memorize every jot and tittle with literally millions of people, probably 100 million people are watching you. Mm-hmm. And you know, what's he supposed to do? Freestyle it? You know, like, so on the one hand, like, it's kind of funny, like, refer to the report, but on the other hand, he was using that statement to dodge making definitive statements. So sometimes he was using that like, for example, there are times when he'd say, like, what page is that? Where did I say that?
Yeah.
To me, he gets a pass for that. As a matter of fact, I like that. I'm like, okay, because he doesn't want to BS a report. But there are other times when this particular phrase, where he would just say, oh, just, you know, refer, because he didn't want to answer it directly. He wanted to report. The other thing that was clear to me is that he did not write every jot and tittle in that report.
Well, yeah.
It's obvious.
I mean,
he had a team.
He had a panel.
He had a team. He had a panel. He probably approved X amount of things, but he did not write. I don't believe he wrote everything, because, and we'll see in a second, there were things that were in that report that he did not know were in the report. And it's not the same thing of, like, not recollecting what page. Right. He just flat out did not know, or he was lying. Either way, no bueno. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go. What we're gonna do, we're just gonna go through a couple clips, and we're gonna talk about it. I think that these clips are pretty important. The first thing, and you know, it's really funny. Like, if you go to CNN.com or Now This, they're all the Democrats who are questioning him, right? Because the Democrats are, you know, anti-Trump and pro-Mueller. And then if you go to a Fox News, all the clips are when the Republicans are grilling him. Yeah, it's like, this to me is probably like the most clearest example
of what happens with those two. Of
bias I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. Just the way that this entire scenario has been reported on both sides.
That's why you need Middle America.
Seduct, right. And to the new Middle Americans, what's up, y'all? So just for clarity, it became very, very clear that the initial narrative was that Donald J. Trump colluded with the Russians to take down Hillary Clinton, and that Donald J. Trump is basically a Russian operative. The big homie Rachel Maddow basically implied, among other things, that the Steele dossier and all that good jazz was true, and that Trump is basically a puppet of Vladimir Putin. That's how. Rachel Maddow is the same person that said that the Russians could freeze us out and all the rest. I mean, just really insane stuff. That
we wonder about your credibility.
It's just. This stuff has gotten so strange. Okay, so that was the initial, and it came out that Mr. Mueller could not find anything conclusive to connect Trump with collusion. And so that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't the end of it, because then it became about obstruction of justice. So all the Republicans were doing a victory lap, but then the obstruction thing came in, and so now it was like, well, he's clear on collusion, but there are 10 instances of obstruction of justice. So I'm going to read by them really, really quickly. The campaign's response to reports about the Russian support for Trump, conduct involving FBI Director James Comey and Michael Flynn, the president's reaction to the continuing Russia investigation. This is where the president says, "I'm effed," when he heard that Mueller was going to be the special counsel. The president's termination of Comey, the FBI James Comey. Yep. Shout out to the big homie. The appointment of special counsel and efforts to remove him. Efforts to prevent public disclosure of evidence, further efforts to have Attorney General take control of the investigation, efforts to have McGahn deny that the president had ordered him to have the special counsel removed, which, by the way, so basically all the Trump apologists have been telling me Trump has nothing to hide. And the reason that they know Trump has nothing to hide is because he had the power to fire Mueller and he didn't.
Okay.
But one of the charges is that Trump was trying to get other people to fire Mueller.
Oh.
So how this is not the behavior of an individual who has nothing to hide.
Exactly.
But let's continue. Conduct towards Flynn and Manafort. Conduct involving Michael Cohen, which we actually shot a video on his conduct with Michael Cohen. We'll talk about that in a second. There are 10 issues where Trump allegedly was attempting to obstruct justice, was attempting to hide something. Now, the Republican response is, well, what is there to hide because he didn't collude with anybody? So he wouldn't have obstructed justice because there was nothing to obstruct. And of course, the response to that is, well, if there was nothing to obstruct, then why did he do these 10 things, right? So that's the essence of the debate. And I think the easiest way of breaking down the video, just for ease of follow along, we're going to do, the first half is going to be the Dems back and forth, and the Dems are, what would we say, pro-Mueller, anti-Trump, and then the second half will be the Republicans who are pro-Trump and anti-Mueller, which we'll see in a second. So that's what you're about to see. Stick around, stick to the end. This is very, very important. It's an important moment in U.S. history.
Yeah,
you gotta give us an hour. You have to. You have to.
I think it's probably gonna be more than an hour, but
you have to. You have to.
Let's get ready to rumble.
Okay, so I'm just gonna start and we're gonna go. By the way, this is gonna be a long one because we want to actually think through these things rationally. All right, so here's the first clip.
The president has repeatedly claimed that your report found there was no obstruction and that it completely and totally exonerated him. But that is not what your report said, is it?
Correct. It is not what the report said.
And now, reading from page 2 of volume 2 of your report that's on the screen, you wrote, quote, "If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we are unable to reach that judgment," close quote. Now, does that say there was no obstruction?
No.
In fact, you are actually unable to conclude the president did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
Well, we, at the outset, determined that we, when it came to the president's culpability, we needed to go forward only after taking into account the OLC opinion that indicated that a president, a sitting president, cannot be indicted.
So the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so basically, when the initial report came out that there was no collusion, Trump was doing the thing, yay, no collusion, no collaboration, hey, and then all the Republicans like, yay. I don't know particularly who said that the Mueller report exonerated Trump.
yeah,
But any sort of phrase of exoneration had to be metaphorical.
right,
For the simple reason that a prosecutor cannot exonerate anyone.
right. Obviously.
A prosecutor or a defense attorney cannot exonerate anyone. And a special counsel, it's outside of his purview, which is a phrase that's going to be used a lot. He can't exonerate anyone. So a lot of this was just political theater on both sides. Like, it was clear that the Democrats had a strategy to say nobody's above the law.
Yeah.
They repeated that about 5 or 6 times a million. Who knows? So, like, it was clear that that's what that was the strategy. But this, to me, was just all political theater. Like, oh, you didn't exonerate him. Right. He wouldn't have exonerated anybody. And this is kind of where I started going, and it was kind of at the beginning, because I'm like, wait, why don't you tell us? Because, there's 300 million Americans. So why don't you look in the camera, Mr. Mueller, and tell us I don't have the authority to do that anyway? It's a moot question. Now, if you give Mueller a vote of charity, you can say, well, because one of the things they tell you is say as little as possible. So I'll give him that. But just for full disclosure, a special counsel can't exonerate anyone. So there's that. All he can do is report his findings, and then Congress takes the ball from there. So this is just indicative of the fact that a lot of this is just political theater.
Where did that originate? The whole
exoneration
thing. Yeah.
Well, a lot of the Trump apologists and a lot of the right wingers were saying like this completely exonerates him, yada 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 yada. And from a metaphorical perspective, they were right because the big thing, all the conspiracy theories, TYT, Rachel Maddow, all of them were touting this big Russia thing. And then when it fizzled, then they immediately jumped from Russia to obstruction.
Yeah.
Now, Anna Kasparian had the character to say, I was wrong. Cenk, of course, Cenk goes, no, I wasn't wrong. I was always talking about obstruction. Okay. That's why Jimmy Dore is no longer with the network, by the way.
Oh, really? That's why?
That was the last straw. He split with them because they were emphasizing this Russia thing, and it was Jimmy Dore had called it from the beginning, this is BS.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so, that, again, it was just a ton of political theater. Very, very entertaining stuff, but I really didn't see, it's kind of like, okay, man, what's the point?
Yeah.
But that was how the whole thing started. So then we have this. What?
Director Mueller, you found evidence, as you lay out in your report, that the president wanted to fire you because you were investigating him for obstruction of justice. Isn't that correct?
That's what it says in the report, yes. And I stand behind the report.
Director Mueller, that shouldn't happen in America. No president should be able to escape investigation by abusing his power. But that's what you testified to in your report. The president ordered you fired. The White House counsel knew it was wrong. The president knew it was wrong. In your report, it says there's also evidence the president knew he should not have made those calls to McGahn. But the president did it anyway. He did it anyway. Anyone else who blatantly interfered with a criminal investigation like yours would be arrested and indicted on charges of obstruction of justice. Director Mueller, you determined that you were barred from indicting a sitting president. We've already talked about that today. That is exactly why this committee must hold the president accountable. I yield back.
Okay, so there it is, right? That's one of the 10 elements of obstruction was that Trump was allegedly trying, and I believe it, trying to get Mueller fired. So all you Trump apologists who are saying, oh, if he had something to hide, then why didn't he fire Mueller? He tried to. What's wrong with y'all? He tried. At least if I'm going to take what Mueller says for gospel, he tried. Now look, again, the reason I started the video by saying that he's being extremely careful with his words, somebody said like he over 200 times didn't answer a question directly.
Yeah, wow.
So my point, and that's why we started the montage at the beginning, my point is, if he says something definitive, that means he's rock solid confident that it's true and there's no way that it can come back to bite him later on in the future. You see what I'm saying? So when he definitively makes a statement, you gotta watch for that because it's like, whoa, that means he's super confident that in the future nothing will happen to him for saying it. That means he's got proof. That means he's got hardcore smoking gun evidence to the contrary. So
why wouldn't he just say yes though? Why would he say it's in the report?
Yeah, but he said I stand by the report, and he did say yes. He did say yes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
He said that. He said that's true. He said
that's true. Okay,
it's true. It's in the report. I stand by the report. Okay. So, sorry, Trump apologists, but it's very hard for me to believe that he got up there and lied about that. If he really didn't believe that, then he wouldn't have come out so stridently about it. So I think that this is something that actually hurts Trump because for the the report's 400 plus pages long. Every side has their talking points. That has been a major right-wing talking point.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Since the beginning. I mean, it comes up every single time we do a call-in fireside. Every single time, all the Trump, what's up, Leah? They all say he could have fired him, and I thought it was a pretty compelling argument. Not anymore. You did try to fire him. You were unsuccessful, sir. Shout out to the president. Good Lord. What?
That's just not good. But it sounded like that they were saying that he tried to get other people to fire him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because he didn't want to do it directly because of
Too obvious.
Right. Because of the implications, correct. Yeah. And then, and said, it's going around that when Trump found out that it was Mueller, he said, I'm effed.
Right.
So he did not want Mueller there. I mean, that's obvious. Okay, so here's the next one.
When someone tries to stop another person from working with law enforcement and they do it because they're worried about what that person will say, it seems clear from what you wrote that this is a classic definition of witness tampering. Director Mueller, in your report, you make a very serious conclusion about the evidence regarding the president's involvement with the Manafort criminal proceedings. Let me read to you from your report. Evidence concerning the president's conduct toward Manafort indicates that the president intended to encourage Manafort to not cooperate with the government. It is clear that the president both publicly and privately discouraged Mr. Manafort's cooperation or flipping while also dangling the promise of a pardon if he stayed loyal and did not share what he knew about the president. Anyone else who did these things would be prosecuted for them. We must ensure that no one is above the law. And I thank you for being here, Director.
Yikes. So we actually shot a video about that whole situation. Remember we shot the video and I compared Trump to a mafia boss?
Yes.
Because when the one guy flipped on him, he's like, send him to jail forever. And then the other guy was like, nope, I'm not saying nothing. Trump was like, that guy's got a lot of guts.
Yes.
But he said that Cohen was weak. Remember, he's the one that snitched on him was weak. He's weak. He's and I was saying, wait a second. If the guy just made up a lie, wouldn't you just say the guy's a liar? What do you mean he's weak? What does that mean? And then the other guy who refused, who stood pat and said, no, I'm not saying anything. He said that guy has a lot of guts. Mm-hmm. There is the thing right there. You can watch the video in full. We shot this close to about 7-8 months ago. Well, wait a second here. If somebody made a complete lie about you, what you would say is that guy's a damn liar, right? Isn't that what you'd say? I wouldn't call him weak.
Right.
You know when I'd call him weak? Is if you and I did something illegal and
he snitched.
You happen to get caught and you snitched on me, I'd say, yo, you weak.
Yeah.
And conversely, if you and I committed some crime and you didn't snitch, I'd say you got guts. Mm-hmm. Which is exactly how Trump comported himself in his tweets and on video. You can check it yourself. Go look at it. That's exactly what happened. And so in that situation, Trump comported himself like a mafia boss. And it's interesting because when they were reading the text, it was like the boss loves you, the boss this, the boss that, which is like mafia language.
Yeah.
So the guy was comporting himself like a mafia boss. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're on the good side of John Gotti, then he loves you and all the rest of it. But if you're on the bad side, then you're a rat, you're weak, you're this, you're that. And obviously Trump wasn't going to go ahead and whack the guy in public, but he basically whacked him over Twitter. But again, this is what I'm talking about, political theater. You see, like, Mueller's just looking at her. Mueller's just looking at her while she makes her pronouncements. Thank you very much, ma'am. I appreciate it. This guy right here, what were your thoughts on that?
No, I'm just picturing, like, sometimes I wish you would tell me what I'm going to see before we watch it, so that I can really be looking at Mueller's face when she was...
Yeah, that one was hilarious. This guy right here, to me, gave Trump the most trouble, I think, in his line of questioning. This guy was, and it was crazy because the networks, depending on the networks, they would help you out, and I'll show you why. They posted a graph as this dude was talking. It was this to me was the highlight of the moment for the Democrats.
Okay. Thank you, Director Mueller, for your long history of service to our country, including your service as a Marine, where you earned a Bronze Star with a V device.
Semper Fi.
I'd like to now turn to the elements of obstruction of justice as applied to the president's attempts to curtail your investigation. The first element of obstruction of justice requires an obstructive act, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'd like to direct you to page 97 of volume 2 of your report. And you wrote there on page 97, quote, Sessions was being instructed to tell the special counsel to end the existing investigation into the president and his campaign, unquote. That's in the report, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That would be evidence of an obstructive act because it would naturally obstruct their investigation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let's turn now to the second element of the crime of obstruction of justice, which requires a nexus to an official proceeding. Again, I'm going to direct you to page 97, the same page of volume 2, and you wrote, quote, by the time of the president's initial one-on-one meeting with Lewandowski on June 19, 2017, the existence of a grand jury investigation supervised by the special counsel was public knowledge. That's in the report, correct?
Correct.
That would constitute evidence of a nexus to an official proceeding because a grand jury investigation is an official proceeding, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to now turn to the final element of the crime of obstruction of justice. On that same page, page 97, do you see where there's the intent section on that page?
I do see that.
C. All right. Would you be willing to read the first sentence?
And that was starting with
Substantial evidence.
indicates that the president's.
If you could read that first sentence, would you be willing to do that?
I'm happy to have you read it.
Okay, I will read it then. You wrote, quote, substantial evidence indicates that the president's effort to have Sessions limit the scope of the special counsel's investigation to future election interference was intended to prevent further investigative scrutiny of the president's and his campaign's conduct, unquote. That's in the report, correct?
That is in the report, and I rely what's in the report to indicate what's happened in the paragraphs that we've been discussing.
Thank you. So to recap what we've heard, we have heard today that the president ordered former White House counsel Don McGahn to fire you. The president ordered Don McGahn to then cover that up and create a false paper trail. And now we've heard the president ordered Corey Lewandowski to tell Jeff Sessions to limit your investigation so that you stop investigating the president. I believe a reasonable person looking at these facts could conclude that all three elements of the crime of obstruction of justice have been met. And I'd like to ask you...
Okay.
Yikes.
So there are three elements of obstruction of justice that you need to prove. And this guy, boom, 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 he wanted McGahn to terminate Mueller. Then he wanted him to create a false paper trail.
Yep.
If you... And again, this is something that he confirmed basically by saying, I'm relying on the report. If you support Donald J. Trump, how in the world can you look at this and say that that was not, if true, let's say it this way.
Yeah.
If true, how could that not be anything other than obstruction of justice?
Yeah.
If I am a major crack dealer and I'm trying to influence witnesses, my dad just happens to be the mayor, and I try to get my dad to fire the presiding, DA. I mean, come on. Well, he'd have to be the governor. If my dad was a governor, I'm trying to get him to fire the existing DA, and then try to get my dad to create a full. Like, come on, y'all. Like, where would I be? We would be shooting videos from a prison cell. Good night. That little, and then of course the media helps you because it's got the little table there. Ting ting ting. All three of them. That to me was the. There's another moment where I was like, ooh, that's not good for Trump. But that was a very, very important moment. Watch this moment though, because this moment right here is very, very important.
Reason again that you did not indict Donald Trump is because of OLC opinion stating that you cannot indict a sitting president, correct?
That is correct.
So basically what he's saying is...
Weird.
Well, so what Lou is saying is, okay, so he hit all three. The only reason you didn't indict him because OLC, that's the Office of Legal Counsel, it says you cannot indict a sitting president. And then he said, right. So basically, the Office of Legal Counsel says, look, you cannot put a sitting president under indictment.
Okay.
So after this so that's the reason he's not indicting Trump. So all the Democrats are saying, see, he would have indicted him, but he couldn't because of the OLC.
Yeah, but then he said, Just because he read it doesn't mean that that's like, yeah, well, what is it?
Well, exactly. He threw a lot of dust into the air. He said, I'm not coming to the same conclusions that you are coming to.
By what we just read.
By what we just read.
But this guy was saying, like, even if they don't succeed, it sounded like he said, even if they don't succeed in what they're trying to do, but the fact that they were trying to do that means they're guilty.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Because the fact McGahn said, I don't really want any parts of that. Mm-hmm. So he wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So it didn't happen. But that doesn't mean that Trump didn't attempt to obstruct justice. You're exactly right. Yeah, exactly. That I got a bunch of people right now messaging me, Vin, the only reason he's not indicted is because he's a sitting president. Well, my blue friends, an hour later, actually 2 hours later, Mr. Mueller had a 2.5-hour testimony in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee after this.
Okay.
In which he stated the following.
Now, before we go to questions, I want to add one correction to my testimony this morning. I want to go back to one thing that was said this morning by Mr. Liu, who said, and I quote, "You didn't charge the president because of the OLC opinion." That is not the correct way to say it. As we say in the report, and as I said at the opening, we did not reach a determination as to whether the president committed a crime.
Well,
that is massive.
Yeah.
He backtracked on it, and he basically said, no, the reason I didn't indict him is because I had nothing to indict him for.
Oh my gosh.
Now, I have people close to me that work at the federal level. Feds do not indict people unless they're 1,000,000,000% sure they're going to win. The FBI has like a 96.4 conviction rate or something like that. That's because they don't you don't get indicted by the FBI on okay?
Unless they have
so to be completely fair, what Mueller just said is the following. One, the OLC decision is not the reason he did not indict Trump. Mm-hmm. The OLC opinion basically made it impossible for Mueller to do so. What he just told us, though, is that he couldn't find enough evidence worthy to indict Trump at the stringent level, at the federal level. That doesn't mean that Trump is innocent, but what it does mean is that the left-wing talking point that the only reason he wasn't indicted was because of the OLC is wrong. Mm-hmm. That's not true. And he specifically he backtracked. Yeah. TYT said he kind of backtracked. Does that sound like kind of a backtrack to you?
He clearly.
And you know what's funny? TYT played the Lou clip. They did not play this clip.
Whoa. That's not cool.
Everybody, all 4 million of you that subscribe to TYT, come to Middle America.
You're going to get straight dope here.
Where you can get the truth.
Yep.
It's just a lie. It's just a lie. Unbelievable. So that is major. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, again, it doesn't mean that Trump didn't do anything wrong. What it means is at the federal level, you need stone cold smoking gun evidence to indict somebody, and he didn't have that with the Russian collusion or with the 10 counts of obstruction. He didn't. Sorry. That's the truth. Okay. So now, right-wingers, it's your turn.
Let's get ready to rumble!
This is Mr. Cabot, Shabbat, or Shabbat. I don't know how to pronounce his brother's name. But he's questioning Mueller. Here you go.
Today. Now, a few questions. On page 103 of Volume 2 of your report, when discussing the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting, you reference, quote, the firm that produced the Steele reporting, unquote. The name of that firm was Fusion GPS. Is that correct?
And you're on page 103?
103, that's correct, Volume 2. When you talk about the firm that produced the Steele reporting, the name of the firm that produced that was Fusion GPS. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. That moment, I said, whoa. That is just a lie. He lied. You're telling me you're not familiar with Fusion GPS and the Steele dossier? I don't know if I told you this, but remember the whole thing about Trump getting a bunch of Russian prostitutes to pee on him and all this?
Yeah, I heard something about that.
Yeah. Okay, so what happened was, and Rachel Maddow boldly broke this story and was smiling and chuckling the entire time. It came out like right as Trump, it was kind of like right before he swore in, or right around that time, that this dossier came out with all this information that Trump was in debt to these Russians, and then there's a video.
Why is it always with Russia?
Oh, it's right. It's Russians. It's the Russians. The new Red Scare, new McCarthyism. Hey!
Oh my gosh.
Apparently, the right wingers are afraid of Mexicans, and the left wingers are afraid of Russians. Let's just be afraid of everybody. Fear. You manly adopted the dog. I was born in it too. But apparently they've got video of Trump hiring these prostitutes to pee on him and da-da-da-da. And basically the whole point was, hey, this guy is now a Russian puppet because he's being blackmailed financially and, you know, by these Russians. It's called the Steele dossier. It's everybody has since moved away from it as a false document and just fluff, and except for like really crazy extremists. But for, you know, like Rachel Maddow, who believes that the Russians can freeze us out. Do you realize that California has a bigger GDP than the entire country of Russia?
Yeah.
But somehow these guys are all powerful all over the world. And he's saying he's not for, now the group. Now here's what happened. A former Republican hired this group called Fusion GPS, and their job is basically to dig up dirt on your political opponents. Okay? That's their job. And then later on, Fusion GPS was financed by a member of Hillary Clinton's inner circle in the DNC to get dirt on Trump. They then hooked up with a Russian lawyer to work on getting dirt on Donald J. Trump. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the DNC, via Fusion GPS, colluded with the Russians to get dirt on Trump to screw with our elections. That's a fact. Everybody knows it. Even Vox. Look, here's a picture right now.
I didn't know that. That's
even.
You know, that's like when you say like, accusation is the first form of confession.
Sadat. That's right. Accusation is the first form of confession. That's correct. Even Vox, who is as left can be, the infamous Trump-Russia dossier was funded in part by Hillary Clinton's campaign lawyer.
Gosh.
Yeah. Hillary Clinton, of course she's going to say she didn't know, I'm sure.
Right.
But this happens every election cycle. Both sides find stuff to dig dirt up on him. You remember when Obama, his preacher got outed, and there was a video of his preacher saying all this racist stuff against white people, and it almost killed Obama's election. Oh, by the way, who was his opponent? Oh, that was Hillary. And you remember the picture of him in African garb, and he looked like a Muslim, and everybody's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Do you know who leaked that picture? Oh, that was Hillary.
Gosh.
Oh, you mean to tell me that Hillary digs up stuff in your past and then blasts you during an election cycle mercilessly? Yes. And
you
so...
can't be very confident of your own, what your own thing that you're bringing to the table is if you're just trying to cut everybody else around you.
The hypocrisy of leftists sometimes is mind-boggling. Oh my gosh, he's destroying our... Look, first of all, even if Trump colluded with the Russians to get dirt on Hillary, it doesn't matter. They've all been doing it all the time. This is standard fare with politics. It's the first thing they tell you when you go to run for something. They say, what's in your past, da-da-da-da, because they're going to find it. And there's whole groups, hello, Fusion GPS, their entire reason for being, the head of Fusion GPS basically said, I am a reporter for hire. Think about that. So they hired, so everybody's been talking about this. This was 2017, October 24th. So what you're telling me, Mr. Mueller, is that Andrew Prokop knew about Fusion GPS, but you didn't? Really? Really?
Obviously he was lying.
I don't know. I don't know, Mr. Mueller. So then he's got to go, oh, Fusion GPS, what's that?
Oh my gosh.
Stop it. Jimmy Dore said, I'm in my garage and I know about
I'm in my garage.
right, let's continue.
Let me just help you. It's not a trick question, right? It was Fusion GPS.
Let me help you.
Now, Fusion GPS produced the opposition research document widely known as the Steele dossier, and the owner of Fusion GPA was someone named Glenn Simpson. Are you familiar with?
This is outside my purview.
Okay. Glenn Simpson was never.
Let me just define what purview is, okay? Because he's asking about Fusion GPS, which I don't know, dear listener. Do you think that the Steele dossier and American politicians colluding with Russians to take down a presidential candidate, thereby affecting our democratic republic, do you think that that would be relevant to an investigation on Russian collusion? Here's what the term purview means. The scope of the influence or concerns of something.
Whoa.
That's not your concern? That's not within your concern? Mr. Mueller?
Were mentioned in the 448-page Mueller report, was he?
Well, as I say, it's outside my purview, and it's being handled in the department by others.
Okay.
Look at this guy.
He was not. 448 pages. The owner of Fusion GPS that did the Steele dossier, that started all this, he's not mentioned in there. Let me move on.
That's crazy.
That's wild.
He didn't even mention him. Because see, now here's what the Republicans are going to say. The Republicans are going to say, well, of course Trump wanted the guy fired. The guy obviously had a bias against Trump. Mm-hmm. And we say, BS, what are you talking about? Well, I don't know. Maybe it had to do with the fact that the guy that started the whole Steele dossier rumor, which was then hired by Hillary and the DNC, his name didn't pop at all in the 440-plus page report because they didn't want to implicate Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Wow.
So of course he wanted him fired. That's what the Republicans are going to say. And if you're a leftist, you need to be honest and say this is a problem. Mm-hmm. This was a problem.
Yeah.
This is a disaster. Mm-hmm. This is like naked, unmitigated bias, obviously.
Yeah.
It's not in your purview.
Right.
What the hell? That was the entire investigation. The entire investigation was American electoral elements trying to influence our democracy via going to the Russians to dig up dirt. Or is it just against Trump? Because that's what it's looking like right now.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, Fusion GPS was working to collect opposition research on Donald Trump from foreign sources on behalf of the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. It also was representing a Russian-based company, Prevezon, which had been sanctioned by the U.S. government. Are you aware of that?
It's outside my purview.
Okay, thank you. One of the key players I'll go to something different.
Okay, so Prevezon is, Fusion GPS was also representing a Russian-based company for American interests. But that's outside of his purview, outside of his concerns or influence. Go watch Rachel Maddow for the last year. Anything relative to an American and a Russian, immediately
comes into play. Yeah.
Immediately. But the fact that this group is working for Russia while they're working for Miss Clinton, completely irrelevant. It's not. It's not his concern.
This is so ridiculous.
Our kids are in trouble right now. They need to learn this phrase.
That's true.
Hey, Dorian, hey, he went to the store. Where did all that come from? Outside of my purview. Did you do your homework? Outside of my purview.
Do not teach them this word. We'll never hear the end of it.
What is going on? Hey, where's the rent? Outside of my purview.
We've got a perfect answer for everything.
What is going on? Leftists, get your boy. He's
one of the key players in the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting was Natalia Wisniewska, who you described in your report as a Russian attorney who advocated for the repeal of the Magnitsky Act. Wisniewska had been working with none other than Glenn Simpson
and Fusion GPS since at least early 2014. Are you aware of that?
Outside my purview.
Oh my word. In
long
2014.
Since 2014.
Yeah.
This group had been working with Russians. So this lawyer, who has an awesome name that I will not repeat because I don't want to butcher her name, but yeah, that's not relevant either. Leftists, can you honestly look me in the eye?
Tell us what's relevant.
And tell me this is not a problem. Because I haven't seen any of the leftist outlets saying that this is a problem at all. They don't even play this clip for some reason.
Really? Why?
But you didn't mention that or her connections to Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS in your report at all. Let me move on. Now, NBC News has reported the following, quote, Russian lawyer Natalia Vizhnevskaya says she first received the supposedly incriminating information she brought to Trump Tower describing alleged tax evasion and donation to Democrats from none other than Glenn Simpson, the Fusion GPS owner. You didn't include that in the report, and I assume you're saying that
is the matter being handled by others at the Department of Justice.
Okay, thank you. Now, your report spends 14 pages discussing the June 9th, 2016 Trump Tower meeting. It would be fair to say, would it not, that you spent significant resources investigating that meeting?
Well, I refer you to the report.
Okay, and President Trump wasn't at the meeting?
No, he was not.
Thank you. Now, in stark contrast to the actions of the Trump campaign, we know that the Clinton campaign did pay Fusion GPS to gather dirt on the Trump campaign from persons associated with foreign governments. But your report doesn't mention a thing about Fusion GPS in it, and you didn't investigate Fusion GPS's connections to Russia. So let me just ask you this. Can you see that from neglecting to mention Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS's involvement with the Clinton campaign, to focusing on a brief meeting at the Trump Tower that produced nothing, to ignoring the Clinton campaign's own ties to Fusion GPS, why some view your report as a pretty one-sided attack on the president?
Well, I tell you, it's still outside my purview.
All right. And I would just note finally that I guess it's just by chance, by coincidence, that the things left out of the report tended to be favorable to the president.
So the guy asks, can you see? So what happened is this lady met with Trump supposedly about tax evasion issues that they had over him. Mm-hmm. Trump wasn't at the meeting at all, and nothing came of it. Right. That made it into the report.
Right.
But the entire Fusion GPS stuff where Hillary was directly implicated in paying this guy, not in the report. So he says, can you see how people would look at that as being biased? And he says, it's not in my purview. What are you talking about?
That's crazy.
Of course it's in your purview. He's asking why people, don't you see how this type of action could lead people to believe that you're biased? Mm-hmm. That's outside the scope of influence or your concern, so you're not concerned about how the American people are perceiving your report? That was horrible. Horrible. And for a man like Mueller, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Valor Device, to get undone by a guy who looks like he's half asleep. Like, no disrespect to the big homie, but he looks like he's half asleep.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, did you know I'm understand?
Yeah.
What a disaster. Yeah. That was an absolute disaster. Good Lord. Good God. You know, I've got an hour-long now this montage of clips from the
really?
They don't include that back and forth. I wonder why. Okay, now here's Mr. Schiff, and they're talking about kind of the same issue on the other side. So he's a Democrat. Mm-hmm. So here we go. Check this out.
Dr. Mueller, your report describes a sweeping and systematic effort by Russia to influence our presidential election. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And during the course of this Russian interference in the election, the Russians made outreach to the Trump campaign, did they not?
That occurred over the course of, that occurred.
It's also clear from your report that during that Russian outreach to the Trump campaign, no one associated with the Trump campaign ever called the FBI to report it. Am I right?
Don't know that for sure.
In fact, the campaign welcomed the Russian help, did they not?
I think we report in the report indications that occurred, yes.
The president's son said when he was approached about dirt on Hillary Clinton that the Trump campaign would love it?
That is generally what was said, yes.
The president himself called on the Russians to hack Hillary's emails?
There was a statement by the president in those general lines.
And numerous times during the campaign, the president praised the releases of the Russian-hacked emails through WikiLeaks.
That did occur.
Okay, so during the campaign, a bunch of Hillary's emails got leaked. Mm-hmm. They got hacked and they got leaked. It exposed a whole bunch. Exposed their infighting. Exposed them. Hillary trying to sell out poor people. It was just terrible, and it really hurt her campaign. Mm-hmm. And the party line, and to be fair, the CIA, all of them are saying, "Oh, that was the Russians who hacked into Hillary's emails." Now, me personally, I don't care who did it. As long as I get to see what these people are actually saying, that's something the American people need to know. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing, though. The guy who leaked all of this information, you've heard of WikiLeaks, mm-hmm. His name is Julian Assange. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Julian Assange says Russia didn't give us any emails. There's a screenshot right there from CNN, by the way. January 4th, 2017, Russia didn't give us the emails. That's what Julian Assange says, and he's the guy that runs WikiLeaks. Wow. The administration says it is 100% certain about Russian involvement, but President-elect Donald Trump has frequently cast doubt on the veracity of the claims. And here's what Mr. Assange says. Our source is not a state party, so the answer for our interactions is no, Assange told Sean Hannity from the corridors of the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Pressed on the source of the emails leaked by WikiLeaks in the weeks and months leading up to the November election, Assange repeated, our source is not the Russian government. It is not state parties. That's CNN. CNN said that. So I'm sorry, but I'm just not buying the party line that it's Russia. Like for him to just say that without any acknowledgement at all, that the head of WikiLeaks,
right?
The legendary man himself explicitly said in no uncertain terms, one, that it wasn't Russians, and two, it wasn't a state representative who gave them the information. Why is that not being mentioned? Mm-hmm. Now, I haven't read all 440 plus pages, but maybe somebody can tell me, is Julian Assange's statement on 4 January 2017 part of the public record in the Mueller report? I'm going to go ahead and bet my left hand that that's not the case. And if it is the case, then
it's
Mueller...
out of his purview, probably.
It's probably out of his purview. And if it is the case, then isn't Mueller duty-bound to tell us that?
Oh, yeah.
If it is in the report, then he should remind him of that in this moment. Mm-hmm. If it's not in the report, why not?
Right.
These are problematic issues.
Right.
I'd like to see if we can broaden the aperture at the end of the hearing. From your testimony today, I gather that you believe that knowingly accepting foreign assistance during a presidential campaign is an unethical thing to do.
And a crime.
And a crime.
Circumstances, yes.
And to the degree...
And a crime given certain circumstances.
And to the degree that it undermines our democracy and our institutions, we can agree that it's also unpatriotic.
True.
And wrong.
True.
No. Oh, that wasn't outside of his purview. Mm-hmm. So when he's asked, could you see how the American people could see that you're being biased in your reporting? Outside of my purview. Mm-hmm. Is Donald Trump unpatriotic? Now, that is outside of his purview. Oh, yeah, and it's a crime. And then he added, it's a crime. He didn't ask you if it was a crime. Why did you add that?
Right.
Isn't it you're supposed to say as little as possible? And the fact that you're saying it's a crime then indicates why you didn't talk about Fusion GPS, because then you'd have to actually indict Hillary Rodham Clinton because you actually have hardcore proof that she did.
Right.
So if it's a crime, then Hillary Clinton needs to be locked up then. This is just unbelievable to me. Unbelievable. The political theater, the hypocrisy is astounding. Mm-hmm. Okay, here's a Mr. Gates. on the Republican side to interrogate Mr. Mueller.
Director Mueller, can you state with confidence that the Steele dossier was not part of Russia's disinformation campaign?
No, as I said in my opening statement, that part of the building of the case predated me, and by at least 10 months.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Manafort's alleged crimes regarding tax evasion predated you. You had no problem charging them. And matter of fact, this Steele dossier predated the Attorney General, and he didn't have any problem answering the question. When Senator Cornyn asked the Attorney General the exact question I asked you, Director, the Attorney General said, and I'm quoting, "No, I can't state that with confidence." And that's one of the areas I'm reviewing. I'm concerned about it, and I don't think it's entirely speculative. Now, if something is not entirely speculative, then it must have some factual basis, but you identify no factual basis regarding the dossier or the possibility that it was part of the Russia disinformation campaign. Now, Christopher Steele's reporting is referenced in your report. Steele reported to the FBI that senior Russian foreign ministry figures, along with other Russians, told him that there was, and I'm quoting from the Steele dossier, extensive evidence of conspiracy between the Trump campaign team and the Kremlin. So here's my question. Did Russians really tell that to Christopher Steele, or did he just make it all up and was he lying to the FBI?
Let me back up a second if I could and say, as I said earlier, with regard to the Steele, that's beyond my purview.
No, it is exactly your purview, Director Mueller, and here's why. Only one of two things is possible, right? Either Steele made this whole thing up and there were never any Russians telling him of this vast criminal conspiracy that you didn't find, or Russians lied to Steele. Now, if Russians were lying to Steele to undermine our confidence in our duly elected president, that would seem to be precisely your purview, because you stated in your opening that the organizing principle was to fully and thoroughly investigate Russia's interference. But you weren't interested in whether or not Russians were interfering through Christopher Steele. And if Steele was lying, then you should have charged him with lying like you charged a variety of other people, but you say nothing about this in your report.
Well, sir.
Meanwhile, Director, you're quite loquacious on other topics. You write 3,500 words about the June 9 meeting between the Trump campaign and Russian lawyer Veselnitskaya. You write on page 103 of your report that the president's legal team suggested, and I'm quoting from your report, that the meeting might have been a setup by individuals working with the firm that produced the Steele reporting. So I'm going to ask you a very easy question, Director Mueller. On the week...
Whoa, I missed that. So that meeting where Trump wasn't there, where the girl had supposedly the damning thing, well, the meeting might have been a setup from Fusion GPS. So you're telling me that Fusion GPS, that you believe possibly that Fusion GPS might have sent this woman from the Kremlin to meet with Trump to set up a U.S. president. It might have been a setup, and you didn't feel the need? It wasn't within your purview to deep dive into Fusion GPS?
No.
Does this make sense to you, my leftist friends? Seriously, it's the same thing I ask the right-wingers. Does this make sense to you? You're speculating that she might have been there to set up Trump to basically to get them to say something.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And you spent 3,500 words on it, but none on Fusion GPS. That's but it's not in your purview.
Right.
Trump being unpatriotic, that's in your purview. It being a crime, even though you're not asked that question, that's in your purview. But this, not in your purview.
Yeah. Or in anybody else's purview on his team, apparently, because it's not in the report.
Sadat. Correct. And we know that it is impossible that Mr. Mueller wrote the entire... I don't believe that he did. That's obvious.
Week of June 9, who did Russian lawyer Veselnitskaya meet with more frequently? The Trump campaign or Glenn Simpson, who was functionally acting as an operative for the Democratic National Committee?
Well, what I think is missing here is the fact that this is under investigation elsewhere in the Justice Department. And if I can finish, sir, and consequently it's not within my purview, Department of Justice and FBI should be responsive to questions on this particular issue.
It is absurd to suggest that a operative for the Democrats was meeting with this Russian lawyer the day before and the day after the Trump Tower meeting, and yet that's not something you referenced. Now, Glenn...
So, did you catch that? Did you catch what just happened?
Mm-mm. Well, I know that there was a meeting and there was something that happened before and after it, and those two events weren't
so there was one meeting with this lawyer, where Trump wasn't present, by the way. He spends 3,500 words on it.
Mm-hmm.
Then Gates asked Mueller, okay, who did this? Who spent more time with this lady?
Mm-hmm.
Trump's people or Hillary's people?
Oh.
He refused to answer the question. It's not in his purview. Does that make sense to you? Based on his non-answer, I'm just going to go ahead and guess that she spent more time with the DNC operative than with Trump.
Wow.
So then Trump says this is a witch hunt, and this entire it was 3 or 4 hours long. We were worried about the bed bugs, so I didn't really get the chance to really. And all I've been listening to is the left-wing stuff all day. So this is really kind of like the first time I'm looking at this stuff. This is crazy. Yikes.
Yeah.
And this is why I haven't seen it, because the left-wingers are not going to show this exchange.
Simpson testified under oath. He had dinner with Veselnitskaya the day before and the day after this meeting with the Trump team. Do you have any basis, as you sit here today, to believe that Steele was lying?
As I said before, I'll say again, it's not my purview. Others are investigating what you
So it's not your purview to look into whether or not Steele's lying. It's not your purview to look into whether or not anti-Trump Russians are lying to Steele. And it's not your purview to look at whether or not Glenn Simpson was meeting with the Russians the day before and the day after you write 3,500 words about the Trump campaign meeting. So I'm wondering how these decisions are guided. I look at the Inspector General's report. I'm citing from page 404 of the Inspector General's report. It states, Page stated, Trump's not ever going to be president, right? Right. Strzok replied, no, he's not. We'll stop it. Also in the Inspector General's report, there's someone identified as attorney number 2. Attorney number 2, this is page 419, replied, hell no, and then added, viva la resistance. Attorney number 2 in the Inspector General's report and Strzok both worked on your team, didn't they?
Boy.
Pardon me? Yes.
Both worked on your team, didn't they?
I know. I heard Strzok. Who else were you talking about?
Attorney number 2 identified in the Inspector General's report.
Okay. And the question was?
Did he work for you? The guy who said viva la resistance?
Peter Strzok worked for me for a period of time, yes.
Yeah, but so did the other guy that said viva la resistance. And here's what I'm kind of noticing, Director Mueller. When people associated with Trump lied, you threw the book at him. When Christopher Steele lied, nothing. And so it seems to be that when Glenn Simpson met with Russians, nothing. When the Trump campaign met with Russians, 3,500 words. And maybe the reason why there are this discrepancies in what you focused on is because the team was so biased.
Time of the gentleman is expired.
Pledged to stop Trump.
Oh, boy.
So 2 of the lawyers on his team, one of them says, we're going to stop Trump.
Yep.
And the other one says, viva la resistance.
And that's, come on, if that actually got said around you, how could you not remember something like that?
Well, the other thing is, people never only make one statement. If you've ever been around an anti-Trump person, it's constant.
All the time.
You're watching the Smurfs and you're like, oh, that Gargamel reminds me of Trump. Like, they talk about it all the time. This dude said, viva la resistance. And it's like if OJ was on trial and it turned out that 2 of the jurors were grand wizards in the Ku Klux Klan. And you're going to tell me that explains why there was all this emphasis on this one meeting and 3,500 words.
Oh, absolutely.
And why this is so bad.
Yeah.
For the Democrats, what a disaster! This babe is my vision of Medicare for all. Whoop, gone. Here's you don't think the Democrats forced this situation, and I don't understand why nobody predicted that this would go as bad as it went? How could you possibly believe? Now I'm like, because, you know, a lot of people, because when I said nothing is going to come of the Mueller report, all these people were like, did you read the report, Vin? Did you read the report? And I want to say to the Democrats, did you guys read the report? Why in the world would you stand this guy up in front of 300 million people?
I know. What were they thinking?
To do this. And you see how he tried to stall? What was that? Who? Huh? What was your question now? Because he can't say it's outside of my purview because you hired them, dummy.
Right.
So because he couldn't find outside of my purview, he had to kind of, well, what can I do? You see, he wrote something down. His chief advisor was next to him. You know what he said? You know what he wrote? You know what he wrote down?
You said the same thing.
Help me! Help me! And his man just stood there like, nah, fam. That's all you. What an embarrassment. Oh, my car.
That's not good.
Oh, my car. Oh, that was an absolute bloodbath. And that's the reason why none of the leftists are touching that one. And I wouldn't touch it either if I was a leftist, because I'm not a sadomasochist. That was horrible. Yeah. That was absolutely horrible. Because it's true. Like, you can't say that's outside of my purview. That's embarrassing. All right, here's the last clip. I've got a couple more clips, but I can't deal with this anymore. No, seriously, like, you know, you see all the stuff on the queue. We're just going to watch one more, and then I'm going to make comments, and I'm going to be done. This is very depressing. I wasn't prepared for this. Good Lord. I mean,
it's terrible. I agree with you. How did they not know this wasn't going to be a disaster?
Democrats are so stupid. How dumb can you be?
Like, what did they actually think was going to happen?
The thing is, it is clear to me...
Do they not know what their party's been doing?
It's clear to me that Robert Mueller is not a upfront guy. He's not a media guy. And these people who are questioning him are career politicians who love to grandstand, and they're extremely intelligent. I keep telling people, if you're a Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. Once you get to those levels, you're in the top 1 percentile of intelligence. These are extremely intelligent people. Mueller is extremely intelligent. The problem is people have various talent mixes.
Yeah.
And obviously, thinking on his feet and charisma is not in his talent mix. That's obvious. And unfortunately, he was the guy that was a special counsel. The Democrats should have knew beforehand that this was not a good play. Here's the last one. Like I said, there's more in the queue. I'm not looking at any more. Seriously, I'm cutting the video short. We're gonna watch this, and then we're gonna talk about Pelosi, and then we're gonna be done, because this is an absolute disaster. All right, you ready? This is Mr. Jordan going after Robert Mueller.
Director, the FBI interviewed Joseph Mifsud on February 10th, 2017. In that interview, Mr. Mifsud lied. You point this out on page 193, volume 1. Mifsud denied. Mifsud also falsely stated. In addition, Mifsud omitted. 3 times he lied to the FBI, yet you didn't charge him with the crime.
Excuse me, did you say one? I'm sorry, did you say 193?
Volume 1, 193. He lied 3 times, you pointed out in the report. Why didn't you charge him with the crime?
I can't get into internal deliberations with regard who would or would not be.
Charge a lot of other people for making false statements. Let's remember this. In 2016, the FBI did something they probably haven't done before. They spied on 2 American citizens associated with a presidential campaign, George Papadopoulos and Carter Page. With Carter Page, they went to the FISA court. They used the now famous dossier as part of the reason they were able to get the warrant and spy on Carter Page for a better part of a year. With Mr. Papadopoulos, they didn't go to the court. They used human sources. All kinds of, from about the moment Papadopoulos joins the Trump campaign, you got all these people all around the world starting to swirl around him. Names like Halper, Downer, Mifsud, Thompson, meeting in Rome, London, all kinds of places. The FBI even sent a lady posing as somebody else, went by the name Azra Turk, even dispatched her to London to spy on Mr. Papadopoulos. In one of these meetings, Mr. Papadopoulos is talking to a foreign diplomat, and he tells the diplomat, Russians have dirt on Clinton. That diplomat then contacts the FBI, and the FBI opens an investigation based on that fact. You point this out on page 1 of the report. July 31st, 2016, they open the investigation based on that piece of information. Diplomat tells Papadopoulos, Russians have dirt, Papadopoulos tells the diplomat, Russians have dirt on Clinton. Diplomat tells the FBI. What I'm wondering is, who told Papadopoulos? How'd he find out?
I can't get into the evidentiary file.
Yes, you can, because you wrote about it. You gave us the answer.
Oh, gosh. You know what this is like?
What?
This is like, you know in the Bible where Paul, there was a shipwreck?
Yeah.
And like they barely survive, they crawl on the island, and then as soon as he gets on the island, he gets bitten by a snake.
Right.
It's like, and the people on the island said, "Hey, this guy's cursed, huh?"
Right.
He's got.
Oh, right.
It's like it just gets worse and worse. I can't get into that. It's on the report. What do you mean you can't get into it? It's in the report. Now it's obvious. This is why I said he obviously did not write. He could not have written this. It's one thing to say to misquote a page. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was on page 68. It was on page 74. You know, like I said, when I was doing my situation, it was about 130 pages. Mm-hmm. So, but I knew everything that was there front to back. Mm-hmm. I didn't know exactly what page, but I knew, especially important talking points from me and from the opposition. I knew exactly where they were, and so did they. Mm-hmm. They knew. Mm-hmm.
And your thing was nowhere near as ginormous as this.
And I'm a punk kid who barely graduated high school.
What is happening here?
What in the world? I kicked their ass though.
You did.
I did. You did. I don't look how he's looking at him too. Look at the cheese. Look at the cheese. Because he knows he has him. Mm-hmm. He knows he has him. This is an absolute disaster. Look at this guy right here. He's not happy. He's unhappy. Trump is sitting there. See Trump with doing jumping jacks?
Yo, yeah.
How do you not know that something was in the report that you made? Now, I think he's just lying. I think he doesn't want to deal with the implications, so this was like a... but what he didn't realize was that it was written. So here we go. Look at his face. He's like, nah.
Page 192 of the report, you tell us who told him. Joseph Mifsud. Joseph Mifsud's a guy who told Papadopoulos.
Did you see how he said, you got me? Did you notice something?
What?
He didn't turn any pages. Now, if you guys notice through the whole report, he usually will say, what page is that? And then he'll turn to it. This guy said it's in page 91, and all he did was look down because he was on the freaking page already.
Or he wasn't even there and he just knew it. So
he knew it. Well, no, he's looking, and then he kind of nods like, yeah. Rewind it and watch it again. He was on the page already.
My gosh.
And then when the guy's laughing at him, he basically like nodded and says, yeah, you got me.
Wow.
Unbelievable. This is the guy. This is the guy that was supposed to take down Trump for us. Okay. All right.
The mysterious professor who lives in Rome and London, teaches in 2 different universities. This is the guy who told Papadopoulos. He's the guy who starts it all. And when the FBI interviews him, he lies 3 times, and yet you don't charge him with a crime. You charge Rick Gates for false statements. You charge Paul Manafort for false statements. You charge Michael Cohen with false statements. You charge Michael Flynn, a 3-star general, with false statements. But the guy who puts the country through this whole saga, starts it all for 3 years we've lived this now, he lies, and you guys don't charge him. And I'm curious as to why.
Well, we can't get into it, and it's obvious, I think, that we can't get into charging decisions.
When the FBI interviewed him in February, FBI interviews him in February. When the special counsel's office interviewed Mifsud, did he lie to you guys too?
Can't get into that.
Did you interview Mifsud?
Can't get into that.
Is Mifsud Western intelligence or Russian intelligence?
Can't get into that.
A lot of things you can't get into. What's interesting, you can charge 13 Russians no one's ever heard of, no one's ever seen, no one's ever going to hear of them, no one's ever going to see them. You can charge them. You can charge all kinds of people who are around the president with false statements. But the guy who launches the guy who puts this whole story in motion, you can't charge him. I think that's amazing.
I'm not certain I agree with your characterizations.
Well, I'm reading from your report. Mifsud told Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos tells the diplomat tells the FBI opens the investigation July 31st, 2016, and here we are 3 years later, July of 2019, the country's been put through this, and the central figure who launches it all lies to us, and you guys don't hunt him down and interview him again, and you don't charge him with a crime. Now, here's the good news. Here's the good news. The president was falsely accused of conspiracy. The FBI does a 10-month investigation, and James Comey, when we deposed him a year ago, told us at that point they had nothing. You do a 22-month investigation. At the end of that 22 months, you find no conspiracy. And what's the Democrats want to do? They want to keep investigating. They want to keep going. Maybe a better course of action is to figure out how the false accusation started. Maybe it's to go back and actually figure out why Joseph Mifsud was lying to the FBI. And here's the good news. Here's the good news. That's exactly what Bill Barr's doing. And thank goodness for that. That's exactly what the Attorney General and John Durham are doing. They're going to find out why we went through this three-year saga and get to the bottom of it.
See, did you see him look down when he said that? See, that's why I said that his goal was a defensive posture because he's worried about himself. Mm-hmm. When he said, go rewind it, when he said the AG is going to be looking into this and why all this, he blinked a little bit, then he looked down. I'm not a body language guy, but when they train you in interrogations,
wow,
go see. Wow. I cannot think of a bigger moment when something is backfired on a group of people than this. This is the biggest backfire I have ever seen in my life.
It's major.
I don't understand how, because the Democrats initiated this. They forced this situation. And I don't understand how they were not able to read how this was going to go.
No, I know.
I'm really starting to believe that the democratic institution and apparatus as a whole is literally incapable of seeing things the way a normal average American who is not a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat will see things. Mm-hmm. I don't want Donald Trump in 2020 because Medicare for All
is so important.
It has become the number 1B issue to me. My number one issue is abortion because I'm pro-life. My number 1B issue, I didn't even say number 2 because to me they're hand in hand, is Medicare for All. And like I said, I don't really care very much about how it's phrased, Medicare for All or whatever it is, or insurance overhaul. I don't care how it is. All I care about is I don't want people going into lifelong debt because they're sick. And I don't want people dying for rationing insulin. I don't want that to happen in my country.
Right.
And it will continue to happen in spades with Donald J. Trump.
Right.
I am for open borders, or as I called it, biblical borders. Mm-hmm. But this is not the way to accomplish it. Now, God bless her, Nancy Pelosi jumped up afterward and they're like, are you going to push for impeachment? She said, no, I'm not doing it. Nancy Pelosi had a DNC.
Yes.
Now, I got to give it to Nancy Pelosi because she's doing the right thing for the party. Guys, if we push for impeachment based on this, you'll have him in a landslide. Trump will win in a landslide.
Of course, yeah. They don't have enough on him.
You don't have anything on him, and this is going to completely work in his favor. And so I'm so happy that Pelosi basically said, no, I'm not pushing for impeachment. And I'm glad. Mm-hmm. I'm glad because...
Have some awareness.
Finally, there's, it's like Colin says a lot. There's an adult in the room.
Right.
And I have issues with Pelosi and things of that nature. I think Pelosi needs to cut bait with the four and really distance the party from them, marginalize the four, force them to create their own party, and get back to middle America. The Democratic Party when in the heydays of the Democratic Party, it was about middle America. It was about blue-collar workers. It was about Bruce Springsteen and all that. You're working in the factory and all that jazz. That's what it was. And Pelosi, I'm sorry, miss, but there are elements in your party that are completely crazy. And this situation, they put us in a situation where this guy got shredded to death and all he's worried about is himself, and rightly so. Mm-hmm. He's in his 70s. He's not trying to spend the rest of his time in federal prison. Right. So I'm not even mad at Mueller for that. But Pelosi, you got to get reins on the party. The Democratic Party needs to get behind a strong ticket. Have a Bernie Tulsi ticket or a Tulsi Bernie ticket. I don't care. Unify the voice. Unify the agenda. Get rid of the four. Because Bernie's there. You already have a progressive. Bernie has progressive credentials. Distance yourself from the four. Get a Bernie Tulsi ticket. Appoint Andrew Yang as a special whatever for economics and artificial intelligence. And get a robust argument going and let's get this done. That's you got
a good plan.
You got to do it, Pelosi. If you don't, it's over. Mm-hmm. It's over. Mm-hmm. And
you're right though. Somebody's going to stand up and lead this thing.
She's doing a great job by holding the line and saying we're not doing the impeachment thing, and I appreciate her for that because finally somebody's stopping the madness. But Pelosi, you got to get these people together, man, because we're running out of time. Mm-hmm. And if you think. And look, I am not a Democrat. I'm saying we. What I'm saying is, when I look at the issues, okay, the DNC in their profile is closely aligned to the issues that are most important to me in this current moment. Now, people say, what about abortion? These people are crazy. Well, there are certain crazies in the DNC when it comes to abortion. My thing is, leave it to the states. Mm-hmm. Right? Just like marijuana. Marijuana swept the country. State by state by state by state. Federal law hasn't been passed. Go look at Buck v. Bell. That's still in the books on a federal level, but no state is going to enact that horrible policy. Mm-hmm. So it's the same way I look at Roe v. Wade. Leave it up to the states. So that's how I justify voting for a Democrat being pro-life.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah.
But I think there are other pro-life issues that need to be dealt with. When I've got an American citizen who's looking at 20 years for leaving some water at the border, that's a problem. Yeah. And I believe that a Democrat in office is much more apt to solve that problem than Mr. Trump is. But Pelosi,
maybe
there needs.
Trump is the one wanting beds for the children and.
Also true.
And your girl was shutting that down.
Yeah, they need to distance themselves from AOC.
They do.
And the four and all these radical progressives. Get them out. Let them form their own party. If they're thinking, all these kids in their 20s, they think it's just so simple. Okay, form your own party and run and see how it works. You and TYT, form your own party. You and Kalinsky, go form your own party and leave the Democrats alone because you guys are superior to Democrats.
Go ahead. Go do it.
And go do it.
Go do it.
But this is an absolute unmitigated disaster. And by the way, don't sit here and say that I'm being biased because a bunch of leftists are saying it's a disaster. Look at this.
I know.
Here's Tim Pool. Here's what Tim Pool had to say. Mueller testimony, a disaster, all caps for Democrats. Trump must be gloating in ecstasy. I agree. Jimmy Dore, who is more left than Bernie Sanders. Let's see what Jimmy Dore has to say about this. Jimmy Dore says, Mueller unravels cringe-worthy testimony, exposes Russiagate hoax, Allahu Akbar. I mean, what the guy from MSNBC called it, as far as the optics go, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Everybody's calling this a disaster.
Yes.
This next election is going to be extremely important. There's a lot on the line, and we're at a tipping point in our country. And this, I just, part of me feels like there's got to be some sort of Trump operative in the DNC that is forcing this. I wouldn't put it past him. Somebody has sold out somewhere because this stuff is inexplicable to me. Anyway. There you go. I'm sure, like we do in all our broadcasts, I'm sure we've said enough to sufficiently piss off the entire planet Earth. This is just as we see it. Yeah, I'm a little bit, but hey, I'll get over it. It's all good. America is the best country in the world. We'll figure it out. We'll make it through. Love your neighbor.
Take care of each other.
Middle America.
We are the media.
Till next time, guys.